everyone, it's Evelyn, and in this week's video we're going to go over how I accidentally became a tiny urban flower farmer. Now the backstory goes back to 2017 when a good customer of ours had phoned and asked if Bruce, my husband, could install some tiles for a friend of theirs who had had a plumber come in, tear out their bathtub, and put in a walk-in shower. They had already bought the tiles, they just needed somebody to install them. So since this customer was a really, really good customer of ours, Bruce went over and had a look and took on the job. So while he was there working, he noticed that they had like a half an acre property, and the wife was busy doing stuff, and she said she was getting ready to plant out her backyard. She sells dahlias, and the whole backyard was basically a dahlia garden, and she was getting her tubers out ready to plant, etc. Bruce doesn't really know that much about gardening. That's not his territory. But he mentioned that his wife, me, was really into gardening, and I had a backyard food garden, and my vegetables were awesome, tasted great, all the stuff, because of course he's gonna like talk me up to everybody and anyone because he's my husband, and mentioned that I had the 10 green thumbs. So she said I should come over and have a look at what she's doing. And so Bruce came home and said that the customer thought that maybe I would be interested in coming over and having a look at what she was doing on her property with dahlias, which I'd never heard of at that point. I didn't know what a dahlia was. So I went over when I had time, and she gave me the tour of her yard and how she plants, and where she plants the dahlias, and then took me up to the front and showed me where she puts her flower stand, and she sells bouquets in it, and she gets lots of sales because she's on like the highway between just almost where Campbell River ends, and so there's a lot of people going back and forth from Campbell River to Courtenay or even further south down Island. So she gets a lot of people stopping by and buying bouquets from her, but she was thinking that this might be her last year because she's actually already in her early 80s, and she was starting to find it a little bit of a slog for her to do a season's worth of a half an acre of dahlia sales. Well, not a half an acre because you have to take the house off. And then she took me into what was like a glassed-in porch area on their house. So it wasn't really a greenhouse, but it was a glassed-in porch, so it acted like a greenhouse. And she was showing me how she had all these tubers that she had stored for the winter. She had them in styrofoam containers, and I forget what they were actually, the medium that the tubers were in inside them was. But anyway, she was suggesting that maybe I wanted to take over selling dahlias for her. Well, I really wasn't all that interested because, first of all, I grew food, not flowers. I knew nothing about flowers. I liked growing food because we ate it. Flowers, what are they for? I would let my vegetables and fruit go to flower, and those were the flowers that all the beneficial insects and bees, etc., would use for food. I didn't plant a whole lot of specific flowers for that. We did have things like feverfew and borage, which just came up on their own anyways, which bees of course love. So there was flowers, but I wasn't intentionally planting flowers. The other thing is we were working 6 days a week. I don't have time to be making bouquets and all that kind of stuff. But she insisted that I should take some dahlia tubers. She was going to give me 6. She said, take these, plant them, and see what you think of them. So I took them, I planted them, and what I did was just prior to that, we had a box hedge that ran along the top of our driveway for 15 feet. It was 6 feet high, 6 feet wide, and 15 feet long. But Bruce, in his spare time, was building and getting ready to install a driveway gate that opened and closed. And that box hedge overhung into the driveway by a few feet. So the driveway gate wasn't going to be able to open all the way, so the box hedge had to come out. You couldn't trim it back because it was just all dead on the inside. And so I had dug it all up by hand. Surprisingly shallow rooted box hedges. I was really surprised. I thought they would be a lot harder to come up than they were. I mean, there was a lot of cutting because that's a big hedge, but the root balls themselves, you dig around them and they came up pretty easily. But anyway, they're now gone, and I've got this 15-foot by I would say it was about 5 feet dirt area that I didn't know what I was going to do with. So I thought, well, I'll just plant these 6 dahlia tubers in there, see what happens, which is what I did. And when they bloomed, I was able to like image search and see what they actually were. And she had given me 2 Wanda Scapella, which is a dinner plate dahlia. She had given me 2 Show and Tell, which is also a dinner plate dahlia. And then she had given me 2 4-inch cactus dahlias that were this really pale orange, which I really, really didn't like. Don't know what they were called, never image searched it because I wasn't ever going to grow that again. I hated it. But I really liked the Show and Tell and the Wanda Scapella. And the other interesting thing is that if I was in the garden working, I only had 4 dahlias growing, 2 of the Wanda Scapella and 2 of the Show and Tell, well, and the 2 other ones. But people would actually pull over in their car and gush over the dahlias and tell me how much they loved the dahlias, dinner plate dahlias especially. And then some of them would tell me stories of their mothers or their grandmothers or whatever who had grown them. And that is when I really started to see the magic of flowers on people. They never ever had that on me. I don't have a very good sense of smell, so I never got the scent from flowers. So I was never into flowers for the scent. But I just was never into flowers. Like I wasn't never interested in people buying me bouquets of flowers. There's other things I'd rather they had bought me than flowers. But to see the power they had on other people was really just amazing. So that got me kind of thinking, well, maybe I do want to do this because it just makes people so happy. But the thing is I still didn't want to do bouquets because we worked 6 days a week. We didn't have the time to be making bouquets to sell to people. That's time consuming. When September rolled around, the long weekend in September, Labor Day weekend, which is I think the first weekend in September, there was a dahlia farm a half an hour south of us in Black Creek called Warwick Dahlias. And they have an open house on the long weekend in September, or had, they no longer do. So I went to it because I just wanted to see what other dahlias were there. I mean, they had so many dahlias. They were a dahlia farm. And it was just amazing walking through the rows and seeing all the different kinds of dahlias they had. There were so many of them. And I took pictures of the ones that I liked. And then when I finished going through all the rows, they sort of had the exit funneled so that you then had to go through like an outdoor store area. And in that outdoor store area, they sold a bunch of different things, but they also sold single dinner plate dahlia stems for $5 and bunches of 10 dahlias for $10. Because remember, this is back in 2017. So I just kind of hung around in the store for a while, chatting, watching, observing, because I like to observe. And I noticed that everybody just gravitated to the dinner plate dahlias, just like they did in my garden. Like, oh, these are so beautiful, I should buy one. And then they'd have it in their hand, and then they'd look over at these bunches of 10, and you could see it going in their head and them thinking, oh, I get 10 for the price of $10, whereas the dinner plate dahlia is $5, so I would only get 2 for the price of $10. And they put the dinner plate dahlia back and grab a bunch instead. And yet they didn't have that sense of happiness about them when they paid for it. It was just more a dollar value judgment on their part, not that excitement over the dinner plate. So I thought, you know, I could do this, but I am not doing the bunches. If I decided to sell dahlias, I'm only going to do the dinner plates, because that's what caused the amazing reactions among people. They were really, really drawn to them. And they were willing to pay $5 for one stem of a dinner plate dahlia until they looked at the bunches for $10. So if the bunches for $10 weren't there, they would have bought that single stem. So I made a mental note of that. It was only September. The dahlias were still blooming away, and I hadn't gone through a winter yet. So I think that year we had our first killing frost for the dahlias in somewhere around the end of November, which was amazing. These big, beautiful flowers were still blooming right towards the end of November. That was just amazing. And they'd started in blooming about, I think, the 3rd week in July. I had planted them in the ground. I hadn't put them in a window or anything. So they started blooming from the 3rd week of July straight through towards the 3rd week of November. I thought, wow, that's a really long time. And they bloomed prolifically. I mean, it was just amazing how many flowers were on each plant. But I had to go through a winter of storing them because that's a huge part of dahlias. So once the first killing frost happened, I dug them up, cut off the stem, washed them off. I had read that you look for the eyes and divide them, and it's easier to do in the fall than in the spring. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, I don't know what an eye is. I don't know what a crown. I don't know where to cut these. So I phoned the woman up that had given them to me and asked her if she could show me how to divide them. Well, she did it so fast, it was just like right over my head. I had no idea what she was doing, but they were divided. So I stored them for the winter. And how I stored them was I had Googled how to store dahlias. I didn't want to do it the way she did it because I didn't want to use bleach. I didn't want to go out and buy a whole pile of styro containers to put them in. And again, I think she used styrofoam pebbles around them as well, and I just wasn't into all that styrofoam. So Google gave me a whole pile of different ways of doing it, as we all know, and I settled on wood chips because a lot of places said if you store them in wood chips, you can get them at either an animal store or a farm store, and you can buy these bags of pine flakes for your small animals or for bedding for whatever. And I thought, well, we have a shop. We have a planer. When you put boards through the planer, you get wood chips, you get little curls of wood. So I have access to a lot of fir flakes. So I thought, okay, fir, pine, what's the difference as far as storing goes? I'm going to store mine in fir flakes. A lot of people also store them in cardboard boxes. Cardboard boxes are really, really hard to get where I live. They just are, I don't know, the stores don't really hand them out. But we do get our groceries in paper bags. So I thought, paper bags, brown paper, cardboard boxes, brown cardboard, I'll use the paper bags. So I stored them in the paper bags. I put flagging tape on each one so that I knew what each one was, taped the bag shut, put them away for the winter, and was ready to just left them there until the spring. So the spring rolls around, and I was wanting to get flowers starting earlier because back at this time, pre-COVID, pre-2020, they were doing garden tours. And I thought, well, and the garden tours was always for the long weekend at the beginning of July, which is Canada Day for us. And I thought, well, it would be really nice to have flowers for Canada Day in my garden, maybe become part of the garden tour. So I thought I would start them earlier, and I just did them in a window. The dividing she had done, I had gotten quite a few tubers off of each plant. But come spring, some of them were dried up because they were too skinny and our temperature was too warm where they were being stored. Some of them had gotten moldy. I hadn't dipped them in bleach. So I didn't have as many plants as I thought I was going to have. I had been talking all winter about how I was going to start selling dinner plate dahlias in the summer of 2018, but honestly, I didn't have enough plants. So even though I said I would sell them, I didn't do anything to promote selling them. If somebody wanted to buy them, they could ask. I did actually sell a few dahlias that summer, but just a few because I hardly had any plants to promote it. And then when the fall came around and after the first killing frost, I did it a little differently. I can't remember what I did differently, honestly. Maybe by that time I had found out about the hydrogen peroxide and I used that, which sort of replaced the bleach. And by spraying a dilution of food grade hydrogen peroxide on them, that gets rid of any possibility of mold happening. So I had better success come spring for those ones that I had stored. However, I also, through the summer, had gone to find out where the best places to buy tubers were because I decided that if I'm going to sell them, I couldn't rely on the few that I had. Plus, I needed more variety. And the place that Warwick Dahlias that I had taken a tour of, they only make their tubers available in the spring once they know what they have. But there was a place on the mainland. I'm on Vancouver Island, so on the mainland of BC, in a place called Mission, is a place called Ferncliff Dahlias. And if you take the ferry over and go to Vancouver, it's well within driving distance. And actually at that time I was still going and visiting my dad because he was still alive at that time. So I could tie a trip in to visit my dad and go pick up the dahlias and not wait for them to ship them to me so that I could get them earlier. Now, I went onto their site and I ordered one of every kind of dinner plate dahlia that they have, and they have quite a few. I mean, you'll have heard the name Ferncliff because there are dahlias that are quite popular that are named after them, like Ferncliff Illusions, for example. So I went and I picked up the dahlias in early, well, actually just before spring, and like around the beginning of March. And then I got them all set up in one of our huge windows and started pre-sprouting them so I could get them in the garden earlier. And the other thing that I did is if I'm going to start, if I invested in that many tubers, I think I bought $750 worth. The tubers ranged anywhere from $10 to $15, so I have no idea how many I bought. I had over the winter prepared another bed in the front garden, because I think one bed or two beds. I think just one bed. Because I was going to need more space for the dahlia tubers. And I also had to figure out how I was going to sell them. So Canadian Tire had a garden wagon for sale because it had been in display, so I went and bought that, and I got that at a really, really good price. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to sell the flowers in this, we can just take an umbrella from our deck with an umbrella stand, tie it to give it a little bit of shade. I don't want to do bouquets, so how am I going to sell single stems? So what I decided to do was literally this. I no longer do this. So I got these pails at Dollarama. Can't remember what they cost. They hold 4 pop cans. Now, they don't hold 4 pop cans loosely because they just flop around. But at Dollarama, I also found these can coolers. We're talking 2019 now, and these were really, really cheap. Pop cans are free. We don't drink pop, but I just asked everyone and anyone I knew if they had any pop cans I could have, and I was able to get 4 in here, like that. Put water in the pop cans, and then of course I couldn't put a big long stem of a dinner plate dahlia. I mean, my stems on a pop can were I got a measuring tape right here, hang on. The stems were probably about no more than 7 inches long, because the pop can isn't even 5 inches tall. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not selling a great big long stem with the dahlias on it, so I can't sell it for $5. I'll just sell them for $4. So I knocked $1 off and sold 1 dinner plate dahlia in a pop can, sold for $4. And then I put also on the sign that if you bought 3 of them, 3 for $10. So that worked really, really well. I mean, I can't believe how many I sold just in that first season, just with having 6 of these sitting in one of those flower wagons with 7-inch stems of dinner plate dahlias. The only thing that was wrong with it, and sometimes people would take the whole thing, and most people just took the flower and realized that this is how I stored them. So every so often, every week at least, some of these were going, so that was cutting into my profit. So I had to come up with another way to do this. Now, I did not come up with a better way to do that for about 2 years. So 2020 I still did this. Although my sales were really, really good in 2019, 2020 came around, and you know what happened in 2020. My sales went whee! But I hadn't spent any more money for the beginning of that season on setup. I used the same flower wagon, I used the same setup, I had everything. I didn't buy any more tubers. Oh, I did buy more tubers. So what I had done for 2020 is, because I had bought one of every dinner plate dahlia that Ferncliff Farms had, I waited until the spring, and then I bought from Warwick Dahlias, down island from me, one of every dinner plate dahlia that they had that wasn't a duplicate of what Ferncliff had. So, and then of course I had to make another 1 or 2 garden beds. I can't remember off the top of my head when exactly each garden bed was created. So I did that, and my sales were terrible. I mean, they were just terrible in 2020, but you know, everybody's sales were terrible with everything in 2020. But I did think that, well, I can't rely just on the dahlias if it's a poor season. I need to stretch out my season and have other flowers so that if sales are down, at least I'm bringing in sales earlier on. Of course, this meant that I might have to put in a bigger commitment, but that was okay, because the other thing that 2020 taught me was I don't want to work 6 days a week anymore, because I wasn't in 2020. I discovered I really enjoyed not being tired, so I didn't want to work. I decided that I was only going to work 4 days a week. And since I was only going to work 4 days a week, I could allow myself to put more time into extending the season of the flowers and potentially starting to do some other things. Maybe bouquets, maybe not. I wasn't ready to do bouquets yet. So what I did was, I thought, well, by this time I knew that a lot of flower farmers start the season with daffodils and or tulips. Well, always tulips, but sometimes daffodils. But I also knew that I didn't want to cut bunches of daffodils and tulips and sell them, because I just thought that was way too labor intensive to make any profit from. And my little research showed that most flower farmers use it as a loss leader. They really don't make money on it. They might get their material costs back, but when you add in the labor, the amount of labor that they put into that, they really weren't. But I already knew that if you put tulips in a pot, if they're perennializing tulips, if you put them in a pot, like 3 bulbs in a 1-gallon pot, they will come back year after year, because this is what I was already doing on my deck. I had 1-gallon pots of orange emperor tulips. Can't remember how many I had, but I would put them up on my deck in the spring when they were blooming, and then take them away, and then bring them back out the next year, and then the next year, and so forth. So I already knew tulips did well in 1-gallon pots. I presume daffodils did as well. So I bought a whole pile of daffodil and tulip bulbs that fall and potted them up to sell those the following spring. Spring rolls around, the daffodils and the tulips start blooming. I get the flower wagon up on the road, I load them up, and they sold like crazy. It was amazing. I had also bought sweet pea seeds, because I thought sweet peas start blooming really early, and they actually can bloom for months if they're in the right spot. So I thought that could be a nice segue from the tulips to the dahlias. And I also bought sunflower seeds. But the thing that I did wrong with the sunflowers is I was thinking dinner plate dahlia strategy. So bigger is better. So I decided that I would plant, because when you plant like pro-cut sunflowers, if you plant them 5 inches apart, you get a 5-inch flower. 4 inches apart, you get a 4-inch flower. I decided to plant my sunflower seeds at the 6-inch spacing, because they say plant 4 to 6 inches. So I went for the 6. I went for the biggest. That was too big. The flowers were just too big, and they barely sold at all. Shockingly, everybody talks about how you can't not sell sunflowers. Well, I did not sell sunflowers. I sold about $40 worth for the whole summer. It was just a complete write-off. But I realized it was my own mistake, so I didn't write them off. The sweet peas did better, but not great, because I was selling them in the pot cans too. Well, same as the sunflowers. So I sold the sunflowers, a great big huge sunflower head with a 7-inch stem. And I was selling sweet peas in bunches in a pot can too, and you can't get that many in a pot can. So while I sold more sweet peas dollar-wise than the sunflowers, maybe about double. I think it was over $100. I don't think so. It still wasn't great. And again, I decided that was my mistake. I was not presenting them the right way to buy them. What worked with the dahlias wasn't going to work with the sweet peas or the sunflowers. So I had to change my strategy for the next year. Oh, I forgot to mention that even though the sweet peas and the sunflowers didn't do well, I still had a much better year. I had gone back to approximately almost identical amount of sales of dahlias as 2019, but I sold a lot of daffodils and tulips. So that increased my sales for 2021 quite a bit. So for 2022, I knew I was on the right path, so we upgraded the flower wagon, so that it could accommodate selling extra stuff. And what I added to the flower wagon for 2022 was, of all my pre-started dahlias, I was now having too many to use all myself. So a lot of the extra ones I sold as pre-started dahlias, so they would come online roughly about the time that the tulips and the daffodils were finishing. So I had that as an extension of plants and pots to sell. And I had done more research over that winter, and I realized, I think that's when 2022 is when I started watching YouTube in the beginning of the year, and I noticed that a lot of people sold in canning jars. Well, there's one thing wrong with canning jars: they have really, really big mouths. So I started going to the thrift store and buying vases with much smaller openings than a canning jar has. And I sold my sweet peas in that. I also tried canning jars. Canning jars don't work where I live. Nobody was buying them. But the little vases, those were selling. So I was able to really increase my sweet pea sales by selling them in cute little vases. I also added a whole pile of other flowers into the system of what I was growing. I added in, for 2022, I added in Bennery's Giant and Queen Lime Series zinnias. Dropped those, didn't do them again because they were basically flowering at the same time as the dahlias, and the dahlias are my show-stopping flowers. Nobody cared about the zinnias. I tried straw flowers, didn't like them. I tried double clip cosmos, loved them for the foliage, so I grew those again. Although the next year, which was this year, I actually did use the flowers. I tried the three series of classic bachelor buttons. Discovered that most of the flowers that were produced in those series I didn't like, but I really liked the really dark purple ones. So I found a place that sold just the dark purple, which was Johnny Seeds, the black button bachelor button. So that's what I did this year. I tried, I forget what kind of snapdragons I tried, didn't like them. Tried 4 different other ones this year, only liked the one of them, which was the, I'll put a picture up on the screen. I'm doing that one again this year, but 3 other new ones. And the other thing that I had been doing this year as well as last year, which I forgot to mention, was in the pop cans, aside from dinner plate dahlias, I had dropped some of the dinner plate dahlias that I didn't like for a variety of different reasons, like for instance the show and tell, because it would just start blooming far too late. It was a really late bloomer, even though it was really, really pretty, but Bodacious was a nice replacement for that, which I have now dropped as well. But I dropped some of the dinner plate dahlias and introduced some smaller decorative dahlias. So not only was I selling dinner plate dahlias for $4 each, but I was selling a pop can with 3 smaller dahlias, whether decorative or ball, for $4 each. And then you could still get the 3 for $10, mix and match, etc. And I will tell you, they still, even though I added in bouquets last year, and my bouquets sell really, really well, I still sell 50% of the pop cans to 50% of the dahlias when it's of the bouquets when it's dahlia season. It's amazing. A lot of times people will buy the bouquet for as a gift, and then they'll buy the pop can with a dinner plate dahlia in it for themselves as well, because they can put it in their cup holder in their car, and they can deliver the gift and have a nice evening with whomever they're delivering it to, and then go home with the pop cans in their car with the one single dahlia in it. I have a customer who buys them repeatedly, and he gives them to bank tellers and people that he deals with all the time that he likes, and he just will hand them a pop can with a dahlia in it as a nice little thank you gift for them. Now I mentioned that I started doing dinner plate dahlias bouquets last year, and if I was putting 2 bouquets out, which I do before it gets really, really hot, by now I had a whole pile of proper flower buckets, which we got from our local grocery store florist department. And then I'm putting in these 2 2-quart milk jugs with the tops cut off, because they hold in there well, and I can put 1 dahlia in each, and then people can take that with them too so that they stay in water. If I only putting out 1 bouquet when it's really, really hot weather, I just put it in a single 4-liter milk jug, and it sits in there nicely as well, and then people can take the whole thing with them. And people really like that because they can keep them in water, because not everybody's going directly to where the flowers are going to go. The other thing I did is I stopped doing the pop cans like this because it was just, first of all, I couldn't get these anymore, so I had to come up with another way of doing it. So what I started doing was using a plant tray, putting the pop cans in here because they don't tip over. Well, first I went one year where I just put them in the way in my new flower wagon, just like that, but they tip over and it went too easy. So these things work out really well, where you just put one in each little hole, and if it's a little bit windy, well, this isn't going to fall over like that because there'll be another one in here, but it'll rock around, but it won't tip over. And then people do take the pop cans, which is fine, but they don't have to worry about pulling it out of one of those sleeves, which is probably why a lot of the times the sleeves went, because sometimes they get stuck in there. So that worked out really well too. So I mentioned my flower wagon. I'll put the link to how I set that up in the spring down below. And I'll also put a link to what changes I'm making for next year. And that will be my spring summer bulbs video, which will be linked down below as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.